So I haven't told this story in a very long time, and in fact, I'm not sure I've ever told this story here at Heartland. But when I was about 11 years old, I remember one of the things that my mom was most excited about was she had bought a brand new wooden dining room table set with beautiful wooden chairs and really a very nice dining room set. Have I told this story here before? I don't think so. She's very proud of it, very excited about it. I didn't, as an 11-year-old, didn't think that would be something to be excited about, but she loved it very much. And so one Friday night, my sister had gone to spend the night with a friend, and I invited one of my friends to spend the night at my house. And my parents actually were going to a party across the alley. And so for the first time, really, my mom was trusting me and my friend to be home by ourselves since they were only across the alley. It was a big test. And I remember her saying to us as she's leaving, as she was heading with Dad out to the home behind ours, she says, "Do not run in the house," right? And immediately after she left, what happened? My friend and I ran through the house. In fact, it was about football season. It was about this time of year. And we were throwing the football around and chasing each other, kind of going in a circle, running and trying to tackle each other. And as we're running around, all of a sudden I hear a bang, and my mom's brand new dining room table chair had been knocked to the ground, and the very top of it had been broken off. And like yes, is right. That's right. So like any good 11-year-old, we tried to cover it up. So I told my friend, lock the door. I was rather pretty bright and ingenious about this. We got some glue and some brown shoe polish. And we glued the top of this brand new, my mom's very proud, brand new wooden dining room table chair to the top, and we got a rag with brown shoe polish, and I will tell you, it looked amazing. And I think we would have gotten away with it if my mom hadn't come home right then and couldn't. I remember the sliding glass door, and she was, "What's going on in there?" and banging it. So we took the glue and tried to set the chair up, and the towels with brown shoe polish on them, and threw them into the laundry room and closed the door and tried to look as innocent as possible, and then let our mother in. And she immediately, rather suspicious woman, she immediately looked at us and asked what happened. Later, she said what gave us away was the smell of glue in the air and the brown shoe polish on our hands and faces. And so we did what any good, typical 11-year-old boys do. We tried to blame each other. No, he was the one that knocked it down. He was, and we explained to her what happened and how we had accidentally knocked over my mom's brand new dining room table chair. And as we're explaining this, years later, my mom would admit to me she was just glad we weren't sniffing glue. So I don't. But as she's listening to us, I could begin to see, and I swear this is true, her face get redder and redder and redder. And I swear her eyes began to bulge. And I thought, I finally have set my mom over the edge. And as she's getting redder and her eyes bulge and just more and more, all of a sudden she breaks out with peals of laughter. She laughed so hard. I think we looked pretty silly with the brown shoe polish and the smell of glue in the air. But I have thought about that for a long time, and years later, I think that defines grace for me. That we expect condemnation. And instead, and we deserve condemnation with the brown shoe polish in our hands and the smell of glue in the air. But the definition of grace is not having God's condemnation, but hearing God's grace. Hearing God's laughter. Abraham is sitting at the front in the entrance to his tent, and he becomes aware 3 strangers are approaching. And as I read this story, it was unclear to me whether Abraham recognizes these 3 strangers as being God. I mean, there is a sense when he calls them master, but it's not clear whether he just sees them as 3 strangers or if he truly sees them as the presence of God among them. And in many ways, it's unclear, but it really is unimportant. It doesn't matter because the point of faithfulness is always to welcome the stranger as if God's presence was coming among you. Always welcome. Now, this morning I told Bob I was going to do this, Bob Hauser. I don't want to embarrass him, but he has been recently challenging the staff and church leadership here at the church to reimagine our understanding of welcome. One of Bob's responsibilities in our church is that he's responsible for the hospitality committee, and he shared an announcement this morning. But Bob has challenged us by saying there's a difference between welcome and invitation. When we say you are welcome, there's a kind of stationary passivity to it. We're here, you're welcome to come among us, right? Glad you came, glad you're here. It's a good thing, of course, a good welcome is very important. And I've never heard of a church in all my years say they're not friendly, right? We're always friendly welcome. But Bob's point, which I think is really important and should be embraced, is that instead of saying you are welcome, we need to say you are invited. A more active reaching out and extending invitation to be together. That's different. Do you see how that could be different than just simply welcoming people who come by? What strikes me about the story with Abraham is that he leaps from his tent, he runs to them, and he invites them. He doesn't just simply welcome them. He invites them to sit down at the base of a tree, and he washes their feet. It was interesting about the text, I don't know if you know this, he went out and he bowed down to them and invited them to come in. And he invited them to come sit under the tree and wash their feet, and he got curds and milk and a young calf and served it to them. He stood there as they served it to them. And it occurred to me, I know we give gifts to visitors at our congregation. I'm not sure how people would respond if we really washed our visitors' feet as they came in. I'm not sure how well that'd go over, and it seems like we often give a coffee mug to some of our visitors. Maybe we should do curds and milk and a fatted calf killed or something like that. But that kind of welcome or invitation is profoundly, if you think about it, almost exaggerated. It's almost too much, right? It is, in some ways, too much. And then these strangers, who we know to kind of be representations of God, ask Abraham, "Where is your wife?" And he tells her, she's there in the tent. And they tell Abraham that when they return in due season, Sarah will have a son. And Sarah, who's eavesdropping from the tent, hears this, and we are told she laughs to herself. Because, as the text says, she is old. I love the way it's put. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women, which means she'd gone through menopause. That's the biblical way of saying she went through menopause, right? And then I love what she says about Abraham. Not only is she old, after I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I be fruitful? You may have noticed that what Barb read was a little bit different. There is actually a translation, shall I have pleasure, right? She's too old for this. Too old for this stuff, right? So she laughs. How can she who is barren be made to bear life? And I've often wondered about that laugh. What did it sound like? Was it an ironic laugh at kind of the ridiculousness of what was proposed? An ironic laugh that says, there's no way this happens. Was it a kind of bitter laugh? I wonder, someone who had always dreamed of having a child her whole life and not being able to. Or I wondered if it was just this out, full-throated laugh at the sheer impossibility of what this stranger says. And then I've also often wondered why she denied laughing. I didn't quite understand that. I don't know if you did. Was it embarrassment? She'd been caught eavesdropping? Was she frightened of condemnation? Condemnation for a lack of faith? But what I do know is that Sarah is receiving this gift of God's grace, so impossible, so big, so overwhelming, so abundant, all she can do is laugh, right? That grace elicits joy and laughter. This amazing, abundant gift. Laughter is an appropriate response to the sheer lunacy of God's grace. That doesn't make sense. How God can take something so barren, whether that be Sarah or our own lives, or whether that be whatever we find ourselves so dry that we don't think it can produce life, God creates new life. And so if we follow Sarah's example, if we're people of the way of grace, people of the way it must elicit from us, and maybe we should do more of it, that grace elicits from us that kind of laughter. Grace, if we truly live it, if we truly embrace it, the sheer giftedness of it, the sheer abundance of it, we are people who have to laugh. Grace is a gift of laughter, and I'll be honest, in a scary world. Right? There's not a lot of laughter. But in the church, in the people of the way who experience the ridiculous abundance of God's love and grace, you just have to laugh. So our calling as people of the way is to invite people to laughter. We often hear the word evangelism used a lot in the church, and It's often a misunderstood word. We tend to think of evangelism as recruitment for the church, right? That's how we tend to think about it. That's what it means to evangelize, is to recruit people to church, which is a good thing, to invite friends to come to church. It's a good thing, but evangelism at its roots simply means announcing good news. It has no purpose other than to celebrate with everyone the good news of God's love expressed to us in Jesus Christ. So we're not only inviting people to come to our church, to be part of our community, to be part of the people of the way, we're inviting them to experience God's grace in such a profound and absolute way that all they can do is laugh, right? I've always believed a happy church is a laughing church, because that's the only appropriate response to God's amazing grace. So a few months ago, we got to experience grace as a church. There were our refugee family that came from Afghanistan had gotten in the abundance of grace expressed by this congregation in caring for them and sharing for them. But one of the most meaningful things for me is that Fazil and his family, after they just got settled, they didn't have many resources, right? They invited a number of members of this church who'd been really active in getting them settled, and they invited us. They didn't just welcome us, they reached out to us and invited us into their home, where they gave us a feast, right? For those who were able to enjoy it. And one of the things I noticed was that Fossil didn't eat with us. He served us. It was an amazing image for me. And I will tell you, there was a lot of laughter around that table, that gift of grace from a family who had nothing and yet fed us an abundant feast. To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.